There are over 10,000 rare diseases. Together, they impact more than 30 million people in the US alone. That's more than cancer and HIV combined.
How do you feel if you had to beg your family and your friends for money to save your kid? I guess I started out when I met a rare disease parent and was just blown away by how much science they knew, how much biotech they knew, and frankly, how much risk they were taking with research. They started their journey 20 years ago.
Why rare disease and what made this your mission?
I didn't know anything about rare diseases. The name itself is misleading and just really bad branding because rare diseases are actually really common.
My friend who one day life was totally normal and the next day we're like, you're going to go to the ends of the earth to get answers to do what's best for your kid, and our system right now isn't designed to do that.
We showed with COVID that we can make vaccines pretty fast if we are motivated.
What is CureTopia? What is the mission of that? The rare need, the rare patient communities?
The mission is to eradicate rare diseases for all humankind.
You guys just recently had your auction.
No, it's still open.
It's still open? Okay.
As of this recording, it closes 9 a.m. Pacific on Tuesday, March 11th.
All right. CureTopia auction still open. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Molecule Podcast, where we dive into the world of decentralized science, biotech innovation, and the pressing health issues of our time. I'm one of the hosts, Jillian, and today we're tackling a topic that affects millions of people, but doesn't always get the attention it deserves. I'm talking about rare disease. A rare disease is defined as any condition that affects fewer than 200,000 Americans. But here's the thing, there are over 10,000 rare diseases. So together, they impact more than 30 million people in the US alone. That's more than cancer and HIV combined. Yet despite their prevalence as a group, these diseases remain underfunded, understudied, and often overlooked by Big Pharma. So why is that? Why does the current system make it so hard to develop treatments for rare diseases? And what happens when science starts to rethink how we approach drug development? Today, we're going to break it all down with someone who's at the forefront of this movement, Ethan Perlstein, founder of CureTopia. He's been working on pushing the boundaries of rare disease using decentralized science, and he's here to share some eye-opening insights and recent breakthroughs in rare disease research. So stick around. By the end of the episode, you'll walk away knowing something new and maybe even be inspired to get involved in rare disease. Let's dig in. All right, Ethan, so excited to have you on the DeSci Podcast and share what you're up to. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no. I'm really excited personally to have you on the DeSci Podcast. I know that you and I had talked a little bit offline about some personal connections to rare disease, and we'll be getting into that here. But yeah, just excited to highlight the work that you're doing and really share more about your mission. I think honestly that would be a good place to start. So maybe starting with like the personal side of things, rare disease research isn't exactly, an easy field to get into or something that's like top of mind for a lot of people. And would love to kind of start with like, why rare disease and what made this your mission?
Yeah, I didn't really, like most people, I didn't know anything about rare diseases. And the name itself is misleading and just really bad branding because rare diseases are actually really common. If you think about them in totality, all 10,000 plus rare diseases. So like most people, it's not their fault. It's just not, as you said, an exciting necessarily place for research to happen, seen as kind of, it may not necessarily a backwater, but like, it's not necessarily the place where everyone's, talking about the most exciting science, even though I think they're missing out. And I guess I started out when I met a rare disease parent and was just blown away by how much science they knew, how much biotech they knew, and frankly, how much risk they were taking with research because their daughters had a fatal disease. And they started their journey almost 20 years ago. And that world was, still early internet age. It's hard for families to connect with each other. And there wasn't ubiquitous genetic genome scale testing at that point. It was pretty lonely. But then just talking to this mom, I thought, is this a regular thing? Do a lot of these parents just end up having to repurpose themselves on this new mission? And sure enough, over time, I did find more examples. Some of these parents are kind of more exceptional than others in the way that some founders or artists or athletes are better than others. So it's no judgment. It's just sort of natural gifts. But they weren't trained scientists. They weren't doctors. They had never heard of this disease before it stormed into their lives. And yeah, I was just blown away by how committed these parents were, and thought they need a lot of science backup. And there didn't seem to be many scientists who were stepping up and saying, sure, I'll dive into rare diseases. And so in 2013, I had a chance to kind of repurpose my career and discover my inner founder, and got on this mission to end rare diseases.
How cool. Yeah. I think you said it best when you said it's almost like a branding issue. Like it is rare disease, and that it doesn't affect, maybe one rare disease doesn't affect a lot of people, but it sounds like the reality is there's a lot of rare disease, which actually makes the whole category of rare disease really big. Am I kind of understanding that right?
But it's kind of when you say all rare diseases and you let everybody in the tent, it's kind of like it's at that point sort of a meaningless affiliation, because what you do have some common interests, but most of the time you're kind of pursuing things specific to your gene, your biology, and there's only a few doctors who specialize maybe in that area. So unlike the AIDS activists, 40 years ago, where you could take people who were individually very different and maybe not aligned, other than maybe that they were gay men, but that necessarily wasn't, they weren't necessarily unified on every position, but on this position they were unified. And you just don't see that same unity in rare diseases, because when you make an umbrella group that to cover everybody, it somehow, and they don't have enough common purpose, or they don't see their common purpose, then it never sort of sparks and never comes together as like a real movement, a real social movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, yeah, rare has been kind of relegated to the shadows mostly, or to just sort of, occasional charitable moments when you're supposed to kind of, hey, this is my rare disease has this random day on the calendar, or, other ways where that supposedly is supposed to get into people's heads or make people care. But whatever your whatever your date, I mean, there just was Rare Disease Day as a last Friday, and it kind of came and went, as I've seen it do for many years now. And so yeah, if we can get into a conversation about how we can change the conversation and get people to care about rare. But yeah, right now it's just very, very hard to unite everybody under one banner. And but yeah, that's part of the motivation for CureTopia, but we can get to that too.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting insight that you're touching on too. Like you said, if you put all rare diseases under an umbrella, you actually dilute you lose the connectivity within your specific rare disease. But if you stay within your specific rare disease, then it's like 1,000 little micro communities, and you don't get the power of the big. So it really is like you almost need like a middle layer or something, which maybe is where CureTopia comes in. But yeah, I hadn't really thought of that, to be honest with you. For me, I had shared this with you, but I've seen that perspective of like the small community. I have a friend who has a kid with rare disease, and watching them go through that journey, like you said, where honestly it was when they were born, and like all of a sudden they were one day, this thing wasn't, in the back of their mind. And then the next day it's all that they could think about, all that they could put time and energy and resources to. And what was so profound to me also is that it's they actually are the subject matter experts. They got so deep in like their research and trying to chase down things for their child that they were actually more versed than some of the medical professionals that they were meeting with. So I'm so excited by the work that you're doing and trying to create meaningful ways that these communities can find ways to work together to amplify rare disease and honestly solve rare disease. Like I think there's a lot of power in what you're doing. And, I think maybe too a good place for us to start before we get like way into it is like what officially qualifies as a rare disease. And is that, is the number of rare diseases growing, or is it kind of like the rare disease landscape has maybe stayed relatively the same? Would just maybe be good to give an overview of that to people who aren't as familiar with rare disease in general.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's growing. It was like 5-ish thousand when I was starting out, then it became 7,000, as of around 10 years ago. As
Wow.
of a few years ago now, it's 10,000. I mean, I don't know what the ceiling is. Every human coding gene possibly could cause a disease, and there's mutations in the parts of the genome that aren't coding for protein directly. So it's a large surface area, and but it's almost like that's also become a distraction, I think, because then it's, well, the legal definition of rare disease is 200,000 or fewer, but most rare diseases would honestly kill to have numbers that big. Hate to put it in those terms, but if you're
Yeah.
that small, you're just like, wow, nobody cares. So, then it's like it's rare, then there's ultra rare, then I've heard nano rare. You could argue there should be a micro rare in between if you're following the
Yeah.
metric scale. Um, you know, it's almost like it also becomes a false identity that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really unite anybody. Because like, hey, your rare disease affects only 50 or fewer too. Great. Like
Yeah.
that's not a cause for being allies in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
It just sort of, okay, now I can brand myself in a way that makes me even more niche.
Yeah.
I'm nano rare. The average person hearing that's thinking, like, is this a really like, is the disease itself small? Like, is it just a
Yeah.
small part of your body? Like, it's just, it's horrible. Like, so, and then legally, if you set a definition, okay, I'm 19, I'm 1,999 because I said ultra rare is officially 2,000 or fewer. Well, crap, what if I'm just arbitrarily on the other side of that line? And, we don't have universal genome sequencing at birth, so we're not capturing everything. And so we don't have the full denominator. It just seems like that's not the rally point either.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are these technical definitions. Some people say, rare, medium rare, common rare. Then you have the
Yeah.
other side. So the point is 90+% of rare diseases affect way fewer than 2,000 people, and probably on Earth, even if we had saturating coverage of all babies born, I don't know what the number truly would be, but the reality is it will ultimately kind of be proportional to the size of sort of each country, how many patients you find there. And, there'll be exceptions for diseases that have, tied to certain genetic populations. But yeah, it's, there's this massive, massive long tail. That's the message. And the reality is most of those are just super isolated, geographically spread out by definition.
Yeah. Definitely. I hadn't even thought of the subcategories of rare. Like I think in my mind, rare is already so rare that I didn't even think about like nano rare, micro rare. But I mean, to your point, there is like a stratification within that, and then even the flip side of being just on the other side of rare. So I can imagine what it's like for each community to try and navigate this. But to your point, it's also probably like a distraction because being more rare than another, I don't know how that if that helps or hurts the funding landscape that people are probably trying to navigate for research. But yeah, I guess one area that I would love to get your perspective on is really like, okay, so each of these micro communities, nano communities, rare, patient and maybe like advocate communities form as they have a rare disease identified. And it sounds like is most rare disease actually seen in children? Is that like the
Um,
patient population?
I don't know if it's numerically most, but that's my experience. My
Hmm.
experience is mostly on that side. But there's a large number of people who are adults who have a rare disease,
Hmm.
and that's either chronic or life-threatening. And yeah, so it's the kids get obviously the more emotional sort of mind space. But yeah, let's not forget there's, and like the AIDS activist movement also showed us that is something quite powerful when the person who is advocating is themselves the patient. And, and which often like I don't see that on my side of rare as much because it's always a parent advocating. But yeah, there's, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. There's all these autoimmune conditions and countless others that are either adult onset or just these are like potentially lifelong conditions. So we don't want to forget that there are people suffering, and they may even present normally, but they're being torn up inside by some kind of disease. So yeah, I think there are some stats that most of the kids who do have a rare disease won't make it to their fifth birthday.
Oh,
And so, yeah, and I think ultimately this has been the challenge of talking about this subject is it's very, very painful. And, you don't want to dwell on it if you're not living it, you just sort of want to click a button, donate or almost just like, okay, let me make this go away in some way.
yeah,
Because, if a normie parent had to spend a day in the shoes of a rare parent, oof,
yeah,
I would like, that would be a reality show.
yeah,
And most, because it would be a reality check that, oh, this is what it's like when my kid doesn't sleep. Regular parents like, yeah, my kid doesn't sleep. And how about you meet parents where the kids haven't slept in 6 years through the night? You know,
man, yeah,
and it's a form of torture on the parents too. And then they're also the caretakers, the breadwinners. So it's just everything about this is just like tragedy, and it's like you don't really want to dwell on it. And I think that's been part of the challenge to get the regular world and to make rare relatable, to make people actually care.
yeah. So I guess like when you think about so for context, my background, I used to work for a big pharmaceutical company, and I saw how, firsthand, like the drug development process and getting something all the way from lab to phase one, phase two, phase three clinical trials. And I guess like when you think about rare disease funding and rare disease research, you know, is that something that, and I sat in like a certain sector of the pharmaceutical company. I worked in oncology and in neuroscience. But I guess like how is funding and research being done in rare disease today? And is this something where like big pharma companies are pursuing treatments for rare disease, or ultimately how are treatments for these rare diseases getting discovered, getting to market if it's not big pharma?
I mean, the only part of the rare disease distribution that gets any love is, the common rares. And you can absolutely create a very large, 10 billion plus size, pharma company by focusing and effectively curing a single common rare disease. And Vertex is like the shining example with cystic fibrosis. And I think, and then back in the day, Genzyme was the original pioneer, with enzyme replacement for Gaucher. So there people have known for decades there are ways to quote make money on rare, but if you're not realizing that most rare is pushed out on that far out on that long tail, then you might think, oh, the problem solved. But there's like a very steep cutoff where if your patient population is back in the day when I started out, it was like somewhere in the low thousands was like if your disease wasn't above a few thousands in the US, it was like you were just invisible. It's just like you're shit out of luck.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I don't even know how you would get, I mean, I can only imagine what it would take to even get on someone's radar to talk about research. I mean, you're just trying to create awareness in general, let alone like what can
Yeah,
we
so
do about it?
if you're not lucky enough to be kind of you're if you're not lucky and unlucky enough at the same time to be like a common rare disease patient, then you have to sort of fend for yourself. And
Mm,
there have been some companies that have formed or and been successful around ultra rare products like Ultragenics and before them BioMarin, half a dozen plus approved products in the orphan space. Some of them, we would call pretty rare. And, those are also, considered commercially successful. But, those companies are also probably at some point, juicy targets for acquisition
yeah.
by some pharma or company that's 10 times bigger. So you can't really achieve that really, really massive scale. Like you can't achieve really the Vertex scale with ultra rare. So, if you're an investor in the class and biotech, you're just thinking, I would rather kind of bet on something that had a bigger market, all things equal. Like why not? It's just your economic interest. And then without the priority review voucher, which hopefully gets reauthorized and other incentives, like you're just always, if your disease is just numerically, disadvantaged compared to a competing rare disease, it's almost like it's creating this weird competition between the rare diseases because now it's like,
Man.
well, no one's going to look at me if I'm below this number. And then if you're really down in the ultra rare, hundreds or dozens of patients, then all the things that the market has ever seen are just like scientific successes where like a parent has done something for their child. So it's recognized as like this scientific achievement, scientific milestone, but then people sort of think about it in a charitable way because they don't see any way to make money doing this. Because they're told, hey, this is even an individualized therapy. So you're just paying for one person. They're like, how the
Yeah.
heck do you make any money? So I think they see all these amazing scientific successes, but because they don't have any commercial value, even though it might save a life even, and that has value, I would think, but the market
Definitely.
doesn't recognize that.
Yeah. It's, I feel like it's such a brutal truth. You know what I mean? That like a lot of how the system works, there has to be a financial incentive. And it sucks for lack of a better word because it's like, you're right. Like one life is worth saving. And especially if you have a passionate patient community that it's not like, someone's trying to save a life of, someone who doesn't want it. Like I think you have like a group of people who are want it more than anything. And so it's to me it's just it's such a brutal truth that like you can want something and be so passionate about, chasing it down. And like you said, even if you get the scientific advancement, like well you advance maybe like the science, but like how is that translating to like impact in that one life? And just taking a step back and thinking about the whole system. And I know for us who have been in the space, like we think about the incentives that are in place and how it plays out, and it really makes it like impossible. I feel like to be someone who feels like you can have impact on, an area of science or disease that you are affected by. Like you see this system, and I can only imagine how like paralyzing it would feel to like feel like you're it's like David and Goliath. It's like what am I possibly going to do, but I have to do something because this is my kid, like I'm going to do whatever it takes. But they certainly I would imagine don't make it easy to even have like a small bit of scientific impact, let alone like day-to-day impact.
Yeah, it's and we're all I see are the parents who choose to fight.
Yeah.
Remember, many people just accept, and the doctors say to them, make memories while you can. There's nothing known. And a lot of people don't talk to a second doctor or may not even trust the medical system to begin with. And then of course the undiagnosed. There's a bunch of invisible folks who are undiagnosed for reasons having just to do with their life circumstance. So I'm just seeing the top of the iceberg,
Yeah.
and but there's a lot of other folks who are basically powerless and not empowered by the system at all.
Yeah. So I guess like in thinking about these, these fighters that don't give up, that are going to do whatever it takes to get an answer or try and find a treatment. How, like, what are they doing today? How are they doing it today? Is it, is there like a process in place that, or how do they, do they each do it their own way and find their own path that they're like, trying to,
Kind of.
make connections and make something really just each a different
I mean,
path?
10 years ago, it was like GoFundMe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that got old. And then, there are other playbooks
Hmm.
and there has been sharing, but oftentimes, yeah, a lot of the underlying technology we're talking about is still on patent and owned by some company, and they don't want to like license it to a rival, and they don't really, a rare disease group is like a speck on the back of a flea on the back of an elephant. They're not even, they don't even think about that. So yeah, it's I think at this point, there have been some examples of folks who found something for their child and have tried to build a company around it. I mean, even go back to United Therapeutics, Martine Rothblatt, and she was, not even a trained scientist per se, but kind of following this path, just got educated because this is your child,
Yeah.
and then developed treatment. I think the rare disease is PAH. So, you know, there are definitely John Crowley is like an OG example of someone who can, leverage their background in biotech already, which is a leg up, but then really execute when no one else was going to do it. So, there are now playbooks, on how to build kind of rare and ultra rare disease focused companies. There have also been a lot of spectacular blowups with such companies, especially in the last bubble period, where a lot of promises were made to rare disease groups and then they got rugged when the market kind of collapsed. And then, you know, a company that brought on 35 ultra rare disease programs, with gene therapy, were they really going to prosecute 35 programs at once? I think every one of those 35 disease groups sure as hell thought so when they were
Yeah.
doing bake sales to do the initial work to get it even started. So when they got the rug pulled, that wasn't so pleasant. And then they had to extract the IP, and then there's all these other parts that no one also sees and talks about, that it's like, how do you unwind and unseparate when things don't work out, when like companies say they're going to do something with rare disease and then they back out.
Man.
So yeah, so I think, yeah, we need to figure out ways to like distribute the playbooks, distribute the knowledge base, create this peer-to-peer network of these founders so that pay it forward, just like we've seen in every startup ecosystem, whatever sort of the vertical.
Yeah. You know, I've been reading a lot lately about a lot of the policy that's like really starting to get in the way of science in the United States. And I think what I'm even hearing too is like, I feel like some of the pain points that like now the broader system is feeling, it's like, welcome, like welcome to
Yeah.
it. Like we've been dealing with this all along. And, like you hate to see the whole system. You don't want science to slow, certainly based on like bureaucratic stuff, but it just exposes, like it really exposes like the need for doing science, in my opinion, and like creating rails for science in different ways. Like we
Hmm.
really, when you think about that whole system, like holding up science because of bureaucracy, and it can't be the only way, especially like I think about it in 2025. Like I'm like, we have different ways of doing everything. Like, why aren't there different ways of doing science? So I guess like to that note, would love to hear, Ethan, like, we call this podcast, it's all focused on like decentralized science, and really, to me it really hinges on highlighting like, issues of health issues and issues in the system like of our time right now. And I feel like the time right now is for DeSci and creating new ways to fund science and creating new ways for patients to have outlets to, like, I feel passionate about this area. Let's go make it happen. Would love to hear from your perspective. Like, you're on the front lines of this. Like, why is now the right time for DeSci to take off? And, what does that movement mean for something like rare disease?
Yeah, I mean, rare disease is already decentralized, you know,
Yeah.
for all the reasons we've been talking about. And so rare diseases and crypto are kind of natural fits.
Hmm.
They both sort of expect speed. They want updates all the time. They want you to move really fast. They're disappointed when, their expectations are not met. Maybe those expectations are unrealistic, but they still sort of just refuse to give in to conventional wisdom, kind of rebellious. There's lots of parallels, actually.
I'm like, wait,
Um,
you have the secret sauce. You know what I mean? We're trying to actually replicate what you guys have been doing. You're exactly right.
yeah, exactly. And so I think just there's like just two major pain points right now for on rare in rare. It's like getting access to this funding to get things going when you have to kind of start from zero. And how do we replace the GoFundMe model with, with something more robust, something more repeatable, something more democratic in some ways, or, not favoring insiders. So I think crypto communities, yeah, there's the good and the bad. There's Trump coin and then there's cures. So obviously there's the ups, there's the downs, there's the volatility. Anyone in crypto knows this. Um, but I think if we can solve the pain point of just financing the earliest stage of research so that all diseases, all patients, no matter where they are, they're all comers are accepted, we're going to build the coolest database that way, actually.
Yeah.
Because, this is not a charity, right? CureTopia is really set up to be sustainable, but also hopefully demonstrate, really, really productive business models, new business models in biotech. And the other pain point besides money, because, how do you feel if you had to beg your family and your friends for money, to save your kid? Like, would you ask them to, sponsor your little league team? That's one thing. The other thing, when you have to put yourself out there, and that sucks. Like we should, and then of course, if you're a wealthy family, you're like, okay, no biggie, but how many families can do that? So pain point one is the money. And then pain point two is the control. You know, I said all these groups have gotten rugged over and over again. Bake sales go fund some basic research in an academic lab, under a sponsored research agreement where, maybe there wasn't clawback rights or anti-shelving provisions baked in because the family was just like, or the foundation was just like, let's go. Or maybe they didn't get tipped from someone else because they're so fragmented and they didn't realize they got a shitty deal. And then, that academic group, that academic institution licenses the IP to a biotech. That biotech goes on to raise a shit ton of money based on all the programs that effectively were fed to it by families funding research in the academic lab, and then yeah, the company at some point says, sorry,
Oh,
music stops,
yeah.
the bull market's done. Yeah, we really weren't ever going to be able to do this, by the way. But maybe the parents and the groups are so desperate, obviously, that they didn't think with their business heads. And then when the company folds up the program, what happens? Well, the IP goes back to university, and then what controls what happens there? And then often again, the patients and the communities get kind of rugged because they didn't realize they should have put in this or that, or they didn't think that this would come to pass. So I think with smart contracts and other things that blockchain technology provides, there's no more excuses anymore, as you said, to just like let this kind of stuff happen. Because then even if the IP reverts back to the foundation, it might be 12 months of ridiculous
Yeah.
negotiations with multiple university parties. And like meantime, time is brain. Patients die while this happens. Like, and if blockchain technology could just make this certifiable, auditable and like, irreversible given certain conditions, like then you don't leave any chance for humans. I think the problem with rare is that there's too many single point failure. There's sort of single node failure points because they're so small.
Hmm.
And so so crypto, because it's a network implicitly, even the way the proof of work works, or proof of stake or whatever, like you sort of have to, there's a mechanism there to kind of make sure things are working properly. So, you don't, someone can't just decide not to do it or wait because it's Friday afternoon and so like, imagine squeezing out all those inefficiencies, which account for a lot of the inefficiencies in the system. We showed with COVID that we can make vaccines pretty fucking fast, like if we were motivated. And, we can do manufacturing at risk. We can do all these things that we normally might not do if we didn't have this, trillions of dollars of economic activity held up. So, I think there are ways to have blockchain really solve pain points. And then, of course, we can create IP, then and biosamples and other things can be put on chain and then tracked so that you don't just rely on, some grad student remembering to write down where they got this or who did that. And then, no room for any of these stakeholders who could kind of turn and get sort of unaligned from you and could kind of bring it all down. So yeah, those are those other pain points
Yeah.
that crypto can
It's like
solve. But
the perfect trifecta, though. I feel like the tech, the science, and I do feel like we're in a movement where it's like there's almost like maybe like a centralizing or like a delayering. Like I feel like we had all of these systems that like centralized media, being one of them. And we're seeing like some of that like really come back down and like really go to the people and seeing more effective news from, a podcaster sitting at home versus CNN. You know what I mean? So
yep,
like I really feel like to your point, like the tech is there, the desire from the people are there, and the science is there, and like string it all together, and like you're now the time is now for DeSci, like now more than ever. I guess like I would love to. I know we've like uh done some few breadcrumbs on CureTopia, but I think now is a great time to share like what is CureTopia, what is the mission of that, and how does that bring together the rare need, the rare patient communities, and the DeSci vision.
yeah, CureTopia. The mission is to eradicate rare diseases for all humankind, and the next part of the answer depends on the audience. If I really want to talk to a general audience, then I would say it's a startup. Maybe you could think of it as a crypto startup, and it is going to operate like a startup in all ways. And behind the scenes, there's going to be the blockchain, and there's going to be obviously the token, the Cures token, but I'm not really going to dwell on that. And if I'm talking to Web3 audience, a more DeSci native audience, then I'll talk about being a bio DAO and lean more into that lingo. But honestly, yeah, I'm mission first,
Yeah.
eradicate rare diseases for all mankind. And there's a reason why DAO isn't in the name, in the front, in the marquee. I made a very conscious choice because what was it going to be? A rare DAO? I'm like, who would have gotten excited about that? We already
Yeah.
talked about how rare, problem with rare, and then
Yeah.
DAO. My God, if you think rare has problems with marketing, DAO.
Oh boy. Yeah. The
So, so
DAOs, I
that's,
feel like is, I maybe I think the DAO model is having a comeback, but I think what you deal with is like the preconceived notions when people hear the word DAO, and it's like, oh boy, like what is that? How does it work? But I mean, I think we're seeing that the model can work. But yeah, you're kind of it's like when I go to dinner parties or get-togethers and people are like, "What do you do?" I like just like you. It's kind of like, okay, what's my audience? How do I say I work in biotech? Do I say I work at a startup, or how far down that path do you meander? But knowing your audience, right? Like there's a depth for different audiences. But yeah, I love that you're mission focused, and I think leaving DAO out of the name probably casts a wider net outside of crypto and can relinquish some of the things that might be confusing or preconceived notions.
yeah. I mean, to some extent, you might even extend that argument to DeSci itself.
Yeah.
But that's another conversation. So, yeah, CureTopia is really focused on taking the ideas and playbooks that my other company Perlara, which is a public benefit corporation, sort of worked out over the last 10, 11 years in the trenches with these families, trying to kind of put patient centeredness, make it real. And I realized there was limitations to that approach, and limitations to doing this in a trad bio construct, and realized we needed to do this in a DeSci construct. Again, it all comes down to this robustness of the network and needing a kind of a true network. Because if you end up, I ran the experiment with Perlara as a public benefit corporation. If you just kind of work with families and just see who comes, you're going to basically work with the wealthiest, most sophisticated families. They can go the distance. And then, whether it's old money or new money, whenever there's money involved in any family, sometimes it brings out the worst in certain people. And so, in spite of whatever thing else that's happening with the rare disease, so that becomes another single point of failure. And so it's like everywhere you go, there's some single point of failure if you just sort of kind of take this trad bio, not community based, but sort of individual family based approach, high net worth family based approach. It's just, I think, in some ways fundamentally flawed. And so CureTopia is really an antidote to that, I think. To say we can't just randomly wait for these exceptional founder parents, to have their family struck by genetic lightning and then they just sort of emerge. I've been, they don't occur a lot. They themselves are rare. Maybe one or two or three such type of parents appear a year. I've been tracking the last decade. Like that's a fixed rate. So they're not going to be the Neo. They can't save everybody because they're focused on theirs. So there's got to be something better. And so I think CureTopia is the vision that if we have kind of these now, I think, quite mature and robust crypto networks for financing, for transactions, for contracting, if those are sort of if those are in place kind of from day one, then we can approach patient communities and say, okay, now when you're going to contribute your data, you don't have to worry about me pulling a fast one. It's all on chain. Everyone can track it. You donate your biosamples, your biospecimens. With amino chain, we can track those. Eventually, we make IP. We can track that. We can control that. That's all going to sound really great to them. And I didn't think I could take Perlara and essentially retrofit it into a crypto mold. I realized I have to start with a blank slate. And so, yeah, that's CureTopia, and all rare diseases are in scope. All people with a rare disease, wherever they are on the planet, are in scope. We can't achieve that in one fell swoop, but we have a roadmap for 25 and beyond where, we're going to first take drug repurposing and scale it for all. And then that becomes kind of the foundational training set for AI drug discovery so we can make truly targeted cures. But this is going to be a multi-year process.
How cool. Yeah. I mean, I think I had never really thought of the single points of failure and really the network effects that you can get from using crypto to, by creating that system in a decentralized way, you minimize the single points of failure. And so to your point, like, I think it's awesome that you had Perlara and learned and like kind of saw, okay, what's working, what's not, what are the single points of failure, and then thought of, it sounds like, a much bigger plan that learned from what you did in trad bio to then inform this, decentralized science approach. So it's not, it's based on like a model that you learn from and can hopefully replicate, but not the same way, because obviously trad bio and decentralized science, different approaches. But yeah, I love the saying that you had of like, there's no single points of failure and all rare is in scope. Like, how powerful is that all rare, anyone in the world has a place that they can come, and almost like a infrastructure that's available to them, as opposed to having to start from ground zero every single time. Like, if you can get people in and, build this model, I can only imagine the time, energy, resources that it would save for the parents, the patients out there, that they can like hit the ground running so much faster.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm going to embrace Web3 lingo, it's like, CureTopia is a rare disease network state. That's the ambition, right? Because each of these communities by themselves will never achieve a critical mass or never create a network effect. Because, but if you can now figure out a way to unite every rare disease, then that's the only hope of creating a network effect.
So
Because
true.
then, the idea would be as soon as you get diagnosed or like, you want to join this kind of mega community. And then by doing so, all the pre-existing members are like, oh, wow, I just got connected to someone who might actually help me on my journey. And that's the network effect that's never been created before.
Yeah.
And that's why I think crypto and blockchain technology, you could just call that technology, right, has finally enabled that to happen. So I talk about Prolara being a public benefit corporation, and that's TradBio. And then I talk about CureTopia being a public benefit community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, again, it's not a charity. I think the rare disease opportunity by itself is $1 to $2 trillion if you can just find cures and treatments for all 10,000 rare diseases. And then any one of those 10,000 rare diseases could itself be $1 trillion moonshot, because you might develop a treatment for a rare genetic disease and then find out, holy shit, that's the Alzheimer's cure. And this has happened before. This has happened with the statins, the cholesterol lowering drugs, Lipitor, one of the most prescribed and taken drugs in the world, and today even for people over a certain age, they're taking a statin. Statins didn't start out that way as like preventing heart disease. They started out treating familial hypercholesterolemia, which was a rare disease, actually kind of common rare, but like people who would have, really high LDL levels in their 20s and 30s and drop dead of heart attacks in middle age. Like that was the target audience first. But then, Brown and Goldstein and all these other people who were doing the basic science, which was NIH funded, realized, connection between cholesterol and just sort of, and LDL and just heart disease, period, not in these genetic population, not rare population, but just in the normie aging population. And then it became a blockbuster. So is every single rare disease drug going to do that? No. But if you've got a lot of those sprinkled in the mix, you have like this second order, blockbuster effect, right? Going after the rare diseases as a group kind of gets you to that blockbuster scale. And then any one of them is a lottery ticket for a rare moonshot that could impact, more of humanity. So, trillion dollar opportunity on top of trillion dollar opportunity, and then $1 trillion opportunities embedded in that. Like, I don't want to sound grandiose or crazy, but I'm just telling you, if you look at what has happened, like, unless you think a statin is a one-off, statin's not a one-off. The GLP-1 agonists, they didn't start out in a niche rare disease, but they started out, like, I think in a segment of diabetes patients, type 2 diabetes patients, which is smaller than the number of people who are obese or are now taking it just to get, to lose weight, right? And so even the GLP-1s took that same sort of rare disease springboard, and they went from something smaller to something bigger. So I don't know what other proof points people need to be like, probably not a one-off, but probably not every single rare disease. That would be crazy to think. But, even if, 1% of those 10,000 rare diseases, could be $1 trillion moonshot, that's $100 trillion right there.
It's so crazy. It's like funny too when I think back to like the top of the call, like the top of the session that we were just talking about, like that people think that there's not financial incentives. Like it's actually like they're just thinking about it the wrong way. Like one is like going for the biggest opportunity and starting there, and the other is actually like exactly like you said, starting small and using that as like insights to go after a bigger opportunity. But to your point, like,
are they thinking about it wrong? This is my point.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to, we talk about this as rare. We frame it up in that word as basically something that's a charitable effort, right? Because it's not a rare earth metal.
Yeah.
That's like, oh, great, I find that, then I hit the mother lode. Rare genetic disease, very niche. And so your mind can't help but think this must be ultimately a charitable cause. And so not to cut you off, but like, why are they not getting it? I think it's exactly this unconscious bias in the words we keep, the way we just describe it. We don't have another word to say it. Should we call them luxury diseases? I don't know, exotic diseases, I don't know what the better name is. I'm not sure it's about a better name. I think it's about creating the network effect. If you create the network
Yeah.
effect, names and memes will follow. But without the
Yes.
network effect, like we're stuck where we are.
No, how powerful. Like you're so right. Like the immediate assumption that you have when you hear rare, it's like it's actually not the right word because there's so much. Yeah, it's rare in terms of its prevalence, but it doesn't mean that it wouldn't have like broader market impact. And yeah, I just think like to me, this is exactly why CureTopia, why now, like why exactly what you're doing is is so powerful. I know too. You guys just recently had your auction, and it sounds like too have been doing
No, it's
some.
still open.
It's
It's
still
still
open.
open.
It's
Well,
still
as of
open.
this recording, as
Okay.
of this recording, it closes 9 a.m. Pacific on Tuesday, March
All
11th.
right. All right. CureTopia auction still open. So what? I know that there was some updates too on like some things
Yeah.
in the lab. Not sure what you can share, but would love to give our audience just like a peek behind the curtain on the science that's actually happening as much as you can share.
Yeah, we did a live stream yesterday. The second half of it, I can summarize quickly. I'm hoping next Monday, in the day before the auction closes, that I can do another space about this. But basically, yeah, we got 100K from Bio as sort of being part of the launch pad, and we knew that we could turn that into results. So CureTopia was incorporated as a Swiss nonprofit of Verein in end of November. We kind of pre-ordered the yeast strains. We already selected this one particular metabolic disease, rare genetic disease called AARS2. We can go into the details with that maybe on the next space. But we kind of teed up everything in December, knowing holidays were coming. And so we kind of just started to do the experiment. Yeah, over Christmas we took a break, but then January we hit the ground running. And then on February 5th, I believe, we got the results. And, we identified several drug repurposing candidates for this metabolic disease where none had existed before. And one of those candidates is a FDA approved drug. And the other is a drug approved in a country outside the US. And so we're super psyched that these are both kind of very clinically actionable. And so for 100K, in 2 months, we got two hits that are super promising, and we have two families that want to jump on. And if you go to the live stream from yesterday, the two moms that are interested in going to try the one or both of these hits were on the call.
Amazing.
And the coolest part in terms of what this means for CureTopia is for 100K, we have our first IP. And I don't know any other BioDAO that's done that, or frankly, any other most companies,
Yeah.
most biotech companies, like for 100K, we have kind of the basis of a provisional patent filing, which
Wow.
we'll do as an IP NFT. I'm looking into the proof of invention, which I just saw Molecule put out. Would love to be a
Yeah.
part of that. But yeah, we're in the process now of getting a patent filing. So even before the auction closes, and with 100K, we're crazy capital efficient, and it's not just a performance, it's not just charity. Like we have
Yeah.
IP, we have a vision for creating platforms in a pill, compounds that could treat bundles of metabolic diseases, so we can grow the market that way. And then, yeah, as I said, you do drug repurposing, you're building a training set for AI drug discovery, and a lot of
Wow.
people don't make that connection, but I
And
think.
maybe for like the layperson, like what is drug repurposing? Like what is that?
Yeah, you just take an old drug and you figure out that it has another purpose. And this could be a FDA approved drug, something approved, a year ago, or something that's generic and been around for a while. It could even be things like supplements that are over the counter that are not approved by FDA for any indication, but can be repurposed in the sense that, maybe they had one use, or one
Hmm.
they thought to have one set of uses, and now we have a targeted use. So in most of the metabolic diseases we work on, we find that a nutraceutical is the top clinical candidate. And I have a couple of
Interesting.
cases we'll talk about more on CureTopia with NMN and
Hmm.
vitamin C. which I'm sure many listeners are probably just snorted a line of vitamin C before the podcast.
Yeah.
And so like we are finding these molecules that are GRAS, generally recognized as safe, that are part of people's supplement stacks with really no strong claims necessarily associated with them. We can say, hey, these are target therapies for these rare diseases. And not just that, these, we can take vitamin C and maybe figure out how can AI teach us how to make a better version that
Wow.
could be better for that rare disease application. And then maybe it goes back up market and it replaces old vitamin C or classic, because we have a new and improved version that we can optimize with AI, but
Yeah.
based on the learnings from repurposing. So
Wow.
drug repurposing is not just this charitable, low value thing. It's actually this stealth training data set you're building for AI. And you're also giving real world benefit to people. And we're figuring out, DTC models that can scale down to small communities.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm sure, if it's a supplement that someone can get, they could go get it. Like you could treat,
Correct.
you could have something for your kid,
Yeah,
tomorrow.
we've done that. I mean, the videos that we've shown, and we're going to put together a highlight reel. Some of these are supplements that the parents could order on Amazon by themselves. They still consult with a doctor. We still think that's a
Yeah.
very good idea.
Hmm.
Don't go totally free range. But many doctors are willing to kind of go along with this exercise if they're open minded. And yeah, we have a bunch of proof points there from Perlara days. So those are the receipts, and now CureTopia can take those methods, processes, scale them up on chain.
Oh my goodness. Well, Ethan, as I mentioned at the start of our talk, like I am so passionate about what you're doing in rare disease. I'm so like I think back to the story that I told my friend who, one day life was totally normal and the next day had
Yep.
this cloud, I don't want to say hanging over them, like like they love their child more than anything, but it's just like this, like parental instinct where like you're going to go to the ends of the earth to get answers to do what's best for your kid, and our system right now isn't designed to do that. And I'm so excited that you guys not only are like creating this network effect where anyone with a rare disease or affected by rare disease can come into this community, but then are generating like science and results and fast. Like the fact that you said you got funding back half of late last year, and now here we are in March, like with some early, hits. Like that in the old system, man, like in our current system, traditional system, like there would be, I can only imagine how long it would have taken those two families to try and get that all strung together themselves, let alone doing it over and over again for each parent that's, showing up to this party. Unfortunately, like there are people with kids being born, or people being diagnosed with rare disease every day. So it's like this constant wave of people that are starting the same process over and over again. And you give them a place to go, and there's like real science happening, and yeah, like novel IP that's happening, and potentially in cases where it's something they could go get, they could have Amazon tomorrow. It's
Hmm.
wild. It's so wild. Well, Ethan, I hope this is the first conversation of many. I appreciate you sharing with our listeners, like not only about like rare disease, but some of the misconceptions of rare disease. To be honest, that wasn't something that I had even thought about myself. The unconscious bias of rare disease, the challenge of rare disease. But then I really appreciate you sharing your mission and what you're setting out to accomplish with CureTopia. And I know that this is the start of many exciting conversations. And yeah, just like can't wait to see really the impact that you guys have. And, not sure if there's any other parting words that you want to share on CureTopia, but we'll share their socials in our description to make sure everyone can find all the information on you guys. But yeah, if there's any other parting words, would love to give you the floor.
Yeah, this is not related directly to Curetopia, but as a side hustle, I've started to do stand-up comedy,
No
and
way.
my material is all about rare diseases, of course. And I just tweeted out an open mic I did last night. So
Ethan,
hopefully,
stop. I did not know this about you.
surprise.
Stop.
So
Stop,
it's
stop.
my hope is that that can inspire rare disease parents who are themselves funny to start sharing their stories in that format, because laughter is the best medicine. Crying about it has not solved the problem. And if we want to create a network effect, then getting popular culture to care about it Whether it's maybe music and art are going to be other ways to do it, but I think comedy at least is my contribution of how do we change the narrative about rare.
I laughter is the best medicine, and I think bringing a light to something that is really heavy is powerful. And yeah, being able to be yourself and not feel like it always has to be heavy. I think that there's something really, really, really powerful about giving people the opportunity to, find the light in what could otherwise be really dark. So I love that. We're gonna have to do like a stand up hour or something, like an open mic with
No,
Ethan.
it's only I can't do that over Zoom. It's going to have to be in the flesh. I'm in the
Oh
Bay
my
Area,
gosh.
but I'm going to start to take it. I'm going to start to take it on the road.
Oh my
We'll
gosh. Well,
see.
you tell me when and where, and I'll be there, and we'll share that as well in the links. But yeah, Ethan, thank you so much for coming by. Thank you for everything you're doing, the hard work, and giving people a community and creating like laughter opportunity as well and camaraderie in this space. Like I'm in awe of everything that you're doing, and yeah, I'm just grateful that people like you have found their way to decentralized science, and I cannot wait to see the impact on rare disease that you'll have in your community.
Cool. Thanks, Julian.
Yeah, we'll have you back for another sesh, but yeah, thanks so much, and we'll go ahead and sign off.